The Puukuokka is the first 8-story high apartment building in Finland, what is made by CLT prefabricated models. So we make quite a lot of research when we started to design this building, and using the CLT is also quite new in Finland. The goal of the project was to use the wood at a new scale. I mean that it's typical material in Finland to make single family houses or that kind of thing. But now we research or try to find the new architecture about the large scale of the wooden housing project. Well, the wood is quite natural material for the Finns, and also I think it's part of the Scandinavian tradition or Nordic society. And I think that the building, how it dialogue with the surround and landscape and how it opens the landscape are also very Scandinavian or Nordic perspective, for my opinion. Puukuokka, it's like always relation with the suburb where it's located. It's not very nice. I mean that the surround is always not very nice. There's quite rough buildings, and it's always dialogue with the buildings and environment and also the landscape, and it really creates the new kind of atmosphere at the location, I think so. Well, I think that the architect, we are always part of something. We are not under the shadow of my perspective. I think that we are more like a dialogue to others and more like a part of the bigger project. I think the architecture is always relationship between the context and also the legacy, the past generations. And this kind of part, it's always like a foundation for the keep going on and try to find the new solutions and new things to do. For me, there is a good example. Is for example the Kärsimäki Church, what was the building what I make very early step, and it's just the building what is just handmade it, but it's a modern and new architecture. So I always think that the past and history it's great possible to find even new way to do things. Architecture has a great potential to impact life and some kind of experience, and onto all different levels, what is including life, I think so. I think that architecture provides some kind of framework or frame in our life, and it's really there's a really lot of things what is depending about the society, what's happened there, and how we can use the architecture.
Halden prison is one of the biggest prisons in Norway. It has 252 inmates and about 300 employees. The thinking behind Halden prison deals with how architecture can be an important part of the rehabilitation of the inmate. Once a Norwegian journalist called Halden SimCity, and that means that it works or is designed as an ordinary Norwegian small town. It has dwellings, lie a certain distance from school, workshop, culture center, sports complex and administration buildings, so that the inmates have to walk and they have a daily routine as other people. And the main aim behind the punishment is how to bring people successfully back into society again. So it's about rehabilitation and this lack of freedom. It's two similar values in the design of the project. There's a famous architect in Norway called Sverre Fehn. He once asserted that as an architect you are always part of another's shadow. It can be another architect's shadow, or it can be all the demands we have to answer as architects. I think that a building can be in dialogue with its setting, especially if that setting is charged. You can look at the site and see its potential before the building is put there. And if it contains a lot of tension, you can choose to push it further on. Or you can, on the other side, you can try to reduce the tension and give the site a new power with a new building and put elements that balance the new and the old. In Halden we have used the nature, the small dimension, the trees up against the perimeter wall, which is a huge horizontal element, and put attention and a story, a new story about the rehabilitation and the lack of freedom into a new design. I think architecture can be a part of a legacy while still making progress. It's about basic elements we have to solve as architects. We have to solve the shelter. We have to solve how people can be secure inside, sleep, work, eat. And then the time is asking new questions, have new possibilities all the way around. Now we have the sustainable architecture in focus. Extreme weather and conditions are so hard, so it affects how we can build. And but also the new technology gives us new possibilities. The potential of architecture in society, I think it's huge, and it's about organizing everyday life. It's about the frame we have, we should live inside. It's about organizing towns that are human and secure. We are talking about architecture and health. Beautiful architecture has the ability to make patients heal more quickly. In the design of hospitals, they are now focusing on that because it shows on the bill, because we feel better and the health is better. And there is more understanding of the potential of architecture, not as only design for the visual, but for the ears, for the body, for everything. It's not only for the eyes, the architecture. When you ask, I'm really happy about this project, and it's running. They are running the prison according to the ambitions, more than we could have ever dreamt about. So the big question, if we had done it different, no.
We were so lucky that the municipality of Helsingborg recognized that this setting was so sensitive that they needed to be working very sort of closely with an architect. The initial idea was to try to understand this landscape and also to understand the contextual setting with the small huts and the climate, which is really windy because you're right facing towards the west. So part of the investigations was about how to protect the outdoor areas from the wind. Actually, we finished the initial process and the first sketches in 2004, and then there was a long process with the planning department and the people in Ro that were, of course, a little bit worried about getting a building on the public beach. So the process was actually stopped for quite a long time. So we didn't start the building process until 3 years later, which meant that the energy requirements had changed. So we had to enclose the inner courtyards, and then we were actually working with the public access to the roof. And the first ideas was that by giving back the roof to the public, we were not taking too much of the public side. For safety reasons, the municipality decided that they were not really up for public access on the roof. So we ended up just having this roof and just having the stairs where you can sit and watch the sunset. I think the site and the way the school is placed on the site is, of course, very Nordic. The the beach and the dunes and the light is very Scandinavian or Nordic. But also I think the way that you actually are placing a school for small children on the most unique site instead of selling it or placing a cultural building there. It's also pretty Nordic. It's a Nordic way of thinking that the preschools and the schools and the is taken care of by society, and they need to have good conditions. Somehow I think it's, I don't really understand what Sverre is meaning by saying in another shadow. I think we're part of a community. We're part of an architectural community, colleagues, and you have discussions and so forth. And I think I don't feel that as being in anybody's shadow. I think there is, but I think everybody's standing on the shoulder of something else. And I think what we are, as Scandinavian architects, are standing on the shoulder of the architects of the 20s and 30s and 40s, of the Nordic modernist architects. And I think the way we work is very much based on the way they were thinking. There's a method, there's a way of thinking, and there's a way of being contextual, I think, that is deriving from that generation. In the office, we work very much with trying to understand the setting, the context in a wider sense, you could say. And it's of course about reading what is there, but it's also about trying to create maybe new spaces that is relating to the public in some ways. And I think by placing this on this very beautiful, very pristine beach setting, of course you're disturbing that and you're changing it, but you're also adding a new way of using the beach. So I think that's part of the understanding of how do you interfere when you're placing a building into a context. You're interfering, but you can also create new possibilities. There's projects where you definitely would say afterwards there's things here that you would like to change, or things that really went wrong that you were not able to change. But I think with this exact project, I think we've been pushing it all the way, and I think the client was also very open to and very understanding in a lot of ways, and I think we had a really good process. So in that sense, I think within the framework of the budget and so forth, I think it actually worked really well.